All right, welcome to week 2 of Valuable Coaching. If you're liking our content, please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Valuable Coaching. And today we have with us Todd Hollenbeck, and Kevin's going to go ahead and give a little bit more of an introduction to him.
So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Coach Todd Hollenbeck. He is the proud son of Jot and Linda Hollenbeck. Todd grew up in the Palos Verdes area where he went to Peninsula High School. He actually played for Stein Metzger when he was in high school. During his high school time, he played for SCVC, where he played for Bill Ferguson, who once was the USC coach. And he also played for John Spraw at the club level, who is now the current USA volleyball coach and UCLA men's volleyball coach. Todd ended up going to the University of the Pacific, where he was a middle blocker and an opposite, and earned a degree in business. After that, he went back down to Southern California to coach at his alma mater with Mike Jade. When he was done doing that for a year, he had an opportunity to work at UC Santa Cruz with Jonah Carson as an assistant coach, doing that for a few years, and then he got the opportunity to be the head Division III women's and men's volleyball coach at Santa Cruz. When he was up there for a number of years, he got a call from Coach Jeff Nygaard over at USC to be the assistant coach at SC. And now he has recently had a lot of success at Menlo College, where he's the head coach and doing great things. Coach Hollenbeck, it's great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, we'd like to ask everybody just how did you get your start in volleyball? All our stories are a little bit different, but how did you get started?
Pretty easy on that one. I had grown up playing basketball, and it just by the time I got to 8th grade, a friend of mine said, "Hey, you want to come try out for the volleyball team?" And I said, "That sounds great." And I was the 6th man or 7th man on the bench. We had 7 players on our team. I made the A team, which is important, but I was the only guy on the bench. I was the worst guy on the A team. And then I got to high school, and our basketball team was super competitive, and I just hadn't reached my stride as a competitive person yet. And the volleyball team was really cool. They did their workouts with the women's team, and I was like, I'm gonna go do that. Or some people asked me to play football, and they worked out every single day of summer, and I'm gonna go play volleyball on the beach. And and that was just something that I fell in love with. And it's funny, my parents, my mom was really, kind of wondered where the volleyball thing was going to go. And she said, if I ever have to ask you to go to practice, then this is over with like football or something. And she said, then later in life, she's like, Todd, I never had to ask you to go to volleyball practice. You were the one telling me that we got to go. And like, hey, it's time to go to practice. Like I was the one driving the ship always about trying to get to practice early. And that's when she knew that volleyball was going to be my sport.
Awesome.
That's exciting. You obviously love the sport. I'm curious to, now that you're a coach, what coaches when you were, in high school or even college really had a huge influence on your life that maybe shape who you are as a coach now?
Funny story, definitely. Sam Crossan, which is kind of interesting. Sam Crossan was my assistant when I got to Pacific. And he was, I was a walk-on. Maybe I should have played D3 or NAI or D2, but he just said, hey, one of the first things he ever said to me as a coach was, Todd, you will never play at the Division I level. And I just like, really? And that was one of these things that just gave me so much fire. He wasn't cutting me or anything, but he just didn't think I had what it took. And as much as I don't know if he meant that as a challenge or as he just saw it like it is, but that was something that was why I always, practiced hard. I always, my freshman year, in terms of weightlifting, I wasn't so bought in. But by the time I was a sophomore, junior, senior, I was putting in tons of extra work in the weight room and kind of really, pushed me into the Division I. Because coming from where I played, we were pretty good. My high school team was good. My club team was good. I played for Spraw, which was like the calmest dude you'd ever met. And, learned a lot from him in terms of just being poised and composed always, or just what it seemed like. Maybe he wasn't on the inside, but on the outside, he sure seemed it. And then from that to Bill Ferguson, who was fiery, and he was always about trying to get his teams to play at this fiery high level. And then to, but they're at the same time, they're all club coaches. So they needed me on that team. And then the transition was to college, where it's like, hey, we're, the MPSF, especially back then, is no joke, right? You had to play and be physical every single night and win every single night. And there was no rapport, there was no pause, there was no gap. Like club, you played for a while, and then you had high school, and then you played club again. Very different things, where the MPSF just didn't stop. You played 2 matches every week, and it's just a whole different ball game. And to walk into that situation and have that coach just be like, that ain't happening for you. It was like, wow, that was really, I wouldn't say refreshing, but it was definitely something different that I had to overcome and say, okay, how am I going to get looked at as someone that can contend on this team? So that would be my answer to that.
Okay. We know you've had a lot of different opportunities playing both indoor volleyball and on the beach. What's maybe one of your favorite memories of actually playing in your playing days?
That's a really good question. Indoor, man, I don't even think I was on the floor, but I remember when we beat UC Irvine at UC Irvine, and they were number 1, and we weren't ranked, and we walked into their gym with like 4 sick players and won in 5 games. And it was one of the most epic matches, and we just played. In the 5th game, we played just lights out, and they left just shocked, and like, we just beat the best team in the country, who ended up winning a national championship. And I think that was just one of those things that was like, anyone can win on any given night. But like the fact that we had, there's a story of one of our players that wasn't even in the game because he was in the bathroom throwing up because he was sick, and our trainer running in there and being like, hey, it's going to a 5th game, can you play? And him just like, sure. And him getting in the game and coming up with some big blocks, and then just being like, that being this epic match. And I watched it all from the sideline, but it was one of my favorite. As far as a beach volleyball athlete, I've won a couple opens that were very memorable in Santa Cruz, and I was ranked in the top 10 in the CVBA for AAA players. I qualified for an AVP event with my partner Lucas Bowl, where they actually flew us down to compete in this regional qualifying event where all the regions throughout the United States sent their best teams. And we lost to a really good Southern California team to really like go to the finals of that regional event in 3 games. And so some of those experiences are probably my favorite, just because they were like the highest level beach volleyball I'd ever played. And the fact that, they're flying us down there and putting up, like, I think they even put us up in a hotel room. That was kind of cool. I never had that happen before. So those were probably my favorite events.
To piggyback on that, Coach Hollenbeck, I remember that match at UCI because I was sitting right next to you. And, the thing that's interesting about that match is we were out. They statistically outdid everything on us after the match. You look at it and you're like, they outhit us. UCI outhit us. They outblocked us. They had a higher passing clip. They had more aces, everything. But I think you kind of touched on it. That was a special team that Coach Wortman had and a good group of guys. And no one, can put a stat on like grit, and no one can put a stat on Simon and Garrett being sick, And what happened is when Irvine beat us, those matches, they beat us 2 sets. They crushed us. They beat us like 25-16. But when we won our sets, it was like 27-25, and that's why the stats were like that. But that was a really fun year, and it was fun playing with you. So
It was.
But anyways, another question I got for you. You have a very interesting path that I think is unique that I want you to touch up on. Is you've already coached in a Power 5 conference, and I know we don't really have that in men's volleyball, but still USC is a Power 5 school. You've coached there. You've coached at Santa Cruz, which is a UC, system school. You've coached the boys and the girls. It's a Division III program that you took to the Final Four as a head coach. And now you're doing this NAIA program that, frankly, they were like 5-20 when you took them over. And by the time now you're entering, I believe, year 3, last year you guys beat Northridge and you had some amazing games and you were coach of the year. Can you talk about the differences of each level that you've coached at and how they've helped impact your coaching career?
Yeah, for sure. I think every level is different, but then also every school is just a completely different equation. Like going into UC Santa Cruz and being assistant for 2 years, even in those 2 years, I didn't learn all I needed to be the head coach, right? So my first year as the head coach there was like, I learned a ton, just to making good and bad decisions. Like I walked in there and tried to change some things that, coming from a Division I school as a player, that I thought, my mentality was like, hey, we gotta rally, we gotta win, we gotta do these things to be more competitive, instead of working more in touch with athletes, right? Because when a lot of those athletes stepped on campus, there wasn't a huge expectation on them. Some of the top kids that we recruited really closely knew that we were a really competitive program. But there's a lot of kids that kind of just walk on or are last minute additions that you really have to build into the mindset that you want. And when my first year, it was like, I didn't put that extra time in, and I just expected them to be as competitive as me. But then, I learned that and changed. It was like, hey, okay, next year we're going to take a lot more time and we're going to work together on team building and, culture bending. Like what do they want? If they don't want a national championship, we're not going to win one, right? So it's how do we get them to all want the same thing, and whatever that thing is, how do we achieve it? And so spending a lot more time on those things early on started to kind of leak into the next year. So like when we had that really epic next year at Santa Cruz, my second season, there was still a really big piece of that in my third season. Like we didn't have to start all over, but every team is a very different, very different monster. So you have to kind of build the monster different each time. And so I learned a lot about that at Santa Cruz, and I had to do everything myself. Like I was the men's volleyball coach in the athletic department, aka also the athletic department. So any fundraising, we had to fundraise $60,000 a year, and we had to go down at these crazy turnarounds where we couldn't stay the night at certain hotels because we just didn't have the money. So I'd be driving back I remember one time Jonah and I we played Cal Bat when they had a program on a Friday night and a Saturday night. And then we lost in 5 the second night, and it was 9:45 by the time we left the gym. And we fed the team, and we drove 7.5 hours back to Santa Cruz. So we got back at like 5 in the morning, which is just insane. Like, and that's actually against most rules in any school, but we didn't have the budget to stay another night. We just couldn't do it. So that was one of those, we were very gritty. Like we had to kind of create this culture of, hey, we put in the work. We've done all these things. We had parents donating money. We had all this stuff where it's like, hey, just to get gear or just to get on a flight and go play in 0 below weather in upstate New York. Like we had to do all these things ourselves, kind of do it yourself. And I think that's what made us good, is that, at the end of the day, the product that was out there was 100% us. It wasn't like we had trainers. It wasn't like we had anything like that. It was what the coaching staff did and how the players responded. And that's what created that. And that's what I thought made UC Santa Cruz a really special place to work. It's an awesome place for me to cut my teeth in coaching, because whatever I said would steer the program immediately. Like, because just so long as I didn't go over budget, no one bothered me, right? I was in charge of all these things. And then on the other hand, though, going to USC was very different, because there's a lot of other guiding factors. Like we had a lot of different staff, right? The only staff at Santa Cruz was me, my assistant, who was getting paid next to nothing. So, he had another job that luckily he came and helped with practices and traveled with the team, but, he wasn't a full-time guy. So I only had to manage myself, and I still find myself doing that a lot, is where I just do it instead of ask one of my assistants to do it. It's just those 7 years at Santa Cruz where I was just constantly doing it. And at SC, it was, you had strength and conditioning staff. We had a compliance officer. We had like our own trainer. We had all this stuff. So, Jeff had to manage not only me and Gary, but all of those people. And it created a whole different thing, because it's like the communication lines get crossed, or this happens. It just, the stressors are just totally different at that level. As much as you've got all this money and backing, it just adds a whole bunch of different stuff on top of it that you have to manage. And you have to manage parents, and you have to manage, athletic directors much more involved in your program. Where at Santa Cruz, I always said, if we didn't go over budget and my paperwork got turned in on time, I don't even think they would know I was alive. There was a couple days that like I was in the red because I bought some tickets and the money was going to come in to cover the tickets. And that was the one time my athletic director called me, like the whole season, was because I was in the red a little bit. And they're like, oh my God, like you're going to sink this. And I was like, it happens once a year. Like, calm down. The money's coming in. But that was the only time. I'd never heard from her any other time. So very different, styles, because the UC is this really big public school, and SC is private, where, hey, everyone's got a little piece in everything. And that was what was cool about SC, though, is learning the ins and outs of all of those decision-making processes helped me tremendously grow into, how do I work with each other coach? Like, now that I'm at Menlo, we have a strength and conditioning staff. So I've got a guy that he's in charge of my team. Now I know, after working at SC, that's so important that him and I work in tandem, toe to toe. We talk, we connect, at least once or twice a week about, hey, this week we're doing this. Let's shore up our workouts, or let's pull back just a little bit. We're beat up. Like, we have this great rapport, which is why, last year we only had one injury, but it was like totally freak accident. It wasn't because we were out of shape or weak. And it was, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that our strength and conditioning staff and I worked together so well. We were constantly in communication. So that was one of those big things that I took away from SC, is how to manage all of it, not just my team, right? How to manage all these other people, and like, we've got a good training staff at Menlo, but, they manage with other teams. How do you build relationships with those trainers? At Santa Cruz, we had one trainer for like 12 people or 12 teams. So it was like, you couldn't really, the relationship building wasn't really there. But now it's like, I've got a guy that he's in charge of my team. I work with him all the time. And that was a really big piece. And it took me a little while to realize that was some of the biggest takeaways, because, there were some awestruck moments like, hey, I'm coaching in the big leagues now, and learning a lot from Coach Nygaard and Coach Gary, just about their life experiences. I mean, Coach Jeff is probably one of the best middle blocker coaches in terms of, he played middle blocker at the highest level and can play, he was playing opposite because they left him in the back row, can play defense, can block on the left, right, middle, because that's what they used to do. So he's seen the game from every single angle. So when he talks about blocking with middle blockers and stuff, it's like, I don't trust many more people than I trust him in terms of teaching blocking and eye sequence. And, it was pretty amazing to just sit and watch him talk about it, because I'd never seen it that way. I'd never been taught certain things like that, or just he knew it. It wasn't that he was taught that way. You could see the game. And so that was some really huge takeaways, was kind of the individual coaching of the next level. Because now we've got kids like at Menlo, and it really helped me. I've got some kids on my Menlo team that play professional, like they played on, for the Austrian national team. And how do I connect with him as a coach, where he's getting international level coaching, and that's what I took some of these takeaways from Coach Nygaard about working with an individual athlete, that his vision and his style of play is so much higher than everybody else. How do we continue to bolster his game without like completely separating him from the other team? Because that was the same thing at SC. We had a couple athletes on that team that were just so high level and could see the games at such a high level. If you're trying to teach them something they already knew, they'd lose respect for you right then and there. Because it's like, hey, I'm talking about the next level, not, something from mid-level, right? So I think that was one of the biggest transitions of that knowledge, was like, hey, how do I work with these professional level athletes. You know, that because that's what SC has some of these, you know, the kids there, they're little, I call them, you know, Coach Gary calls them little professionals, because it's like, hey, they've got the training staff, they've got these schedules where they've got to keep every day, like, to make them the best. And so it's like, you know, we try to do that at Menlo a little bit, is like treat them like little professionals, because we are a business school. So along with teaching them about volleyball, we teach them business through volleyball in terms of, hey, how can we be professional in everything we do? So that, you know, when we go out, when they graduate, they can go work or they can go play, and a coach is going to respect the fact that they can show up on time, be respectful, get work done without having to, you know, without pushback or anything like that, and still be a competitor and not get shook by other people's personalities, because that's professional volleyball is such a different game. So that's, I would say, kind of the differences in each level that I've took away. You know, and NAI is such a, you know, where I am now, it's new. It's cool because it was been around for a minute, but now it's just growing so much that, you know, there's some really good teams now. You know, like, I'll just even give a shout out to Brad Rostratter down at Vanguard, is doing a fantastic job. And I knew he was, when he took that job, I knew that they were immediately going to be our rival. And I mean, he assisted at Pepperdine, so we used to clash there, and we clash now. And I mean, and I am 1-0 against them. I'll toot my horn on that. But it was in 5, and it was a nutty match. Like, they are very good, and because he's a good coach and he coaches up good kids. So, I mean, the NAIA, I think we're really going to see this, you know, upward trend of not only the athletes we get, but the programs that pop up. Riley Salmon is coaching NAIA at a school, Jamestown in North Dakota. And Riley Salmon played on our national team and is a great coach. He's a USA coach and all that stuff. And their program is fantastic. So, I mean, we're slowly really building some traction in some of these areas. It's funny that California has been last on the NAIA train, because there's only been 1 or 2 schools in the state of California that have had NAIA volleyball until the last 3 or 4 years. Or no, I guess 5 years or so. But, you know, I think that with NAIA, I think the sky's the limit, because we don't put a lot of rules and red tape that cost money and time on things, and get a chance to really focus on the athlete and just the experience of getting a good degree, play some high-level volleyball, and graduate in 4 years. That's the NAIA goal, is, you know, coaching with character, and, you know, teaching these guys to be student leaders, and, you know, getting them to where they want to go, and not so much, oh, like at SC, I remember having to track hours that we spent with them every day, and every single kid, like, oh, we saw them for 1 hour and 15 minutes, and having to mark it all down and stuff. And we just don't have to waste time on that. We can call them up or have little meetings with them and do other things that help build our program, rather than kind of waste time and money doing some of these things that the NCAA, with good reason why they have to do, because of the money and stuff, but we don't have to. So that's a long-winded answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I think it's great that you're able to touch on the fact that there are different, you know, different divisions out there available for kids. I know too often kids that I see, that they see Division I volleyball as really or Division I sports as the only option if they're going to go somewhere. And there's so many other avenues for them to take, whether it be community college or Division III, like you said, or NAIA. So that's great to hear that that's growing. You touched a lot on weights and that. We've been asking too about really kind of what's your philosophy when you are recruiting players, and then if they have experience in the weight room, if they have experience in other sports, do those things help you, you know, kind of separate players out when you're recruiting?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a really good question. It depends on my recruiting cycle, so who I'm looking for. Like, if I'm just shoring up a recruiting class and there's some kids in my community that are just good volleyball players, or that just really want to come to our school, you know, I'm not so concerned if they're weightlifting yet. I much rather them almost lack a lot of knowledge, so that when they come in, they just learn the right way. Because I've had kids that just learn from like, oh, I weightlift with a friend, or my old buddy's dad was a trainer, so he trains me up. And it's like, well, is he training you to be a volleyball player or just so? Sometimes it really doesn't matter about weightlifting. But like we've got a kid coming in for 2021 who's like a keystone recruit for us, and he's already on our workout program. And granted, it's just an app-based workout program, so it doesn't include any weights yet. But it's just because it's still COVID times, but it's going to help build a base to keep him just strong. It's not going to put on mass. It's not going to do anything like that. It's not going to risk injury with lifting, but it's going to help him build a strong core, good jumping mechanics, and all that stuff. So that by the time he starts actually hitting the weights, he's going to have a great base. And so that's what I really look at with kids is like, what's their base? How do they, when they're playing, how are they jumping? Are they jumping consistently? Are they just a one jump guy where they jump super high one time and then that's it? So in terms of strength and conditioning, it just really depends on where I'm in my cycle. And some kids, like we've got a couple kids coming in, I love it. They're like, hey, they've been weightlifting and doing volleyball workouts for a long time, and they're getting bigger and stronger, and they're really committed to that. Them get our trainer right now. So they're working toe and toe with our trainer, and he's making them custom workouts so that they're not just lifting to lift, that they're lifting towards our team goals, but they're experienced enough that they can put weight on. So it just really depends. And I think that, strength and conditioning is probably the biggest like equalizer of the sport, especially for NAIA. I know for D1 it is a lot too, because we just get to see a little bit more transformation, right? I could see a kid come in that, comes in touching 10-6 and is weak. And, if they put their time into the weight room with our strength and conditioning staff, come out flying high and hitting hard because they still have a lot of room to grow. They're not already, super tall, super muscular, super, jump well, hit hard already. But we get to see that transformation. And so, knowledge of strength and conditioning is not the biggest thing, but it helps. But I'm neither here nor there, because the right kid, we can get them on our workout plan. But it just really depends, because we got him so early. That's what's going to work out best for him. But if we get someone late, I won't even get them started on it. I'll just wait until they come onto campus and get going.
Is it something you'd like to see club coaches and even high school coaches try and incorporate a little more? I know you coach at the club level. I know during COVID time, I saw you posting a lot of workouts, look like to motivate people. I know in my job, I've done that as well, trying to kind of lead by example. But do you wish that those younger levels would at least introduce it in a correct way? Would that help you out?
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest thing, is what they're actually teaching. Like if let's say it was the biggest thing for me that my high school, we lifted in the fall, right? It was a full conditioning class. We didn't even touch a ball for some time, right? We were just conditioning for high school. That if they had actual conditioning class, that would be helpful, just because it's going to kind of prep them mentally and physically. And like you said before about kids that play multiple sports, that's what I do appreciate about guys who play basketball. You ask them to do a set of sprints and they laugh because it's a joke to them. Where it's like, some kids, if you're not doing your cardio, that you could injure yourself. So it's like, I think doing a fall, once high school season starts or high school starts, and doing like a, core and strength and conditioning class where it's just really not about weights, but just about, core consistency, mechanics of lifting would be very helpful, just for kids to be healthy during their actual season, right? Less ankle sprains, less hurt knees, less hurt shoulders. And I think that would really be helpful, but I don't need them lifting heavy yet. That's, I think that's.
So obviously you go to JOs every year. You go to these qualifiers. You do coach club at Mountain View Volleyball Club, great club. Obviously you're looking for the kid who jumps really high, hits the ball really hard. We get it. But what is something like a little nugget that you can maybe there might be some future recruits listening to this, or kids that want to play in AI. What is something that a college level coach like yourself that is impressed when you see something in the gym that maybe not another coach is impressed with?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And it's something I really worked on when I was at SC, was just vision in general, watching a kid's eyes in terms of how they read the game, right? Watching a middle and just watching their head when they're read blocking. What are they looking at? How are they responding, right? What's the hand-eye coordination in terms of seeing the ball, tracking the ball? Because you might see a middle who's only 6'3", but if he's got the vision, it doesn't matter. You could train him to be one of the best blockers in the gym if he jumps okay, but has the vision, because he's always going to be able to read and make good read block plays. But it's like some of these guys that are really tall, sometimes they don't read very well. And granted, you can teach kids to read, but if they already have that like quick hand-eye coordination and quick vision and reaction speed, that's something that's like, okay, now we can put on a couple pounds, we can get you in the gym lifting, get your vertical up, and now not only you have a step ahead reading, but now we can get you moving fast and explosive. That, because obviously I'm a middle blocker, so that's something I look for, because that was something I always struggled with, is my vision. And a lot of coaches, I remember John Spraw absolutely bearing me one practice about how I needed to keep my head up so I could see things. But I didn't have a lot of coaches ever really break down all the little bits and pieces of blocking vision for me as a blocker. So watching kids do that, and then you could say that about any position. Like, how do kids track the ball coming over the net when they pass? Because a kid might be on a twos team and just average physically, but if you can track how he reads the game and he's a step ahead of some other guys, you can work. That's a huge piece to work with, because again, it's about training him up on all those other things. But if you also have to train a kid how to read from the ground up, it can be very difficult, especially if you want to play. Like in our gym, we're so competitive, that we recruit kids that already have kind of that vision. So to bring a kid in that's a full step slower than everybody else takes time to get them to kind of. And I was happy enough that with a little bit of luck and some strategic recruiting, that we were capable of having such a competitive gym. But every year is not going to be perfect. So I think that's the one little piece that I took away that has really changed kind of how I look at. Because it's always like, hey, I could see a guy jump high, like you said, hit hard, or someone who's really long or just really tall, or floats a little bit when they jump, or blocks big. But big blocking is not always great, right? You got to just be able to, if you've got bad hands or you're not looking, you're ducking your head. Those are all really tough habits to break. And granted, that's my job as a coach at the NAI level is to pick kids that, maybe has something great and then something not so great, and you fix that not so great thing. But if you can find those kids that are already one step ahead, just visually and structurally and kind of with their posture and stuff, that just helps the process all that much more.
I love that answer, because I just have seen how hard it is with high school players who have only maybe even played a couple years, and trying to get them to break the habits. Even if it's defensively, not as much blocking, but just trying to get them to read the court a little bit more than just going to a spot. And so I love that answer, because, vision is key, and allowing them some freedom to have that vision and move around, I think is a great thing to have.
Yeah. And the biggest thing with that, it's trust, but developing how to balance the floor with your vision. Like if I'm a libero, how do I balance everything that's going on from a defensive standpoint is really hard to train. And so if you can find someone that already, maybe they over exaggerate things, or they do this, but it's like, hey, they get it, they just haven't put it together yet. That's your diamond in the rough that, you can train that, instead of like, I've had liberos that were really good serve receive passers, but you put them on defense and they just couldn't read the floor. They just weren't, their hand-eye coordination was just too slow against a go ball or a red set, like how to adjust and where to be. But I mean, a lot of those players, you know, good coaches can see those things, and a lot of those players play at top programs because that's, you know, like what's the Stanford libero's name? Watching her play was just like, it's unbelievable how she balances the floor and reads the game. I just remember watching her this a couple years ago and just being like, you know, she's that good because she's always one step ahead of everything else.
Well, you know, one thing I wanted to have you touch up on is I think it's fascinating to study a coach and a program, and you can never predict how long it's going to take. You can sometimes predict, like you said, with Coach Brad down at Vanguard, that you're like, okay, they're going to be good, but you never know how long when you got the Menlo job, people were excited. You know, they're like, okay, that he's got some Northern California roots. He's a club coach up there before. He's going to do just fine. He also played college not far, you know, Pacific's not that far from you. But you took over a 5-20 team. And it seems to me that probably the culture wasn't that great. And what did you have to do? Because what was your record last year? Was it 17-0 or 17-1?
Well, so yeah, we were 17-0 in the NAI and 17-1 was our record.
And you beat like Northridge and went real tough with GCU.
Yeah, well, GCU caught us on a real bad day. I think if we would have played them again, I wouldn't say we'd win, but we would have played better. That was, you know, that's one of those things that you see in an NAIA team where we went up against GCU in the final third of our season. And as a coach, there's a part of me that just said, hey, let me just play everybody else that came on the trip. Just so we could rest our guys, because we were going into another really crazy third to play Vanguard again, Open again, and the GCU match didn't really matter. But it's, you know, we, like I said before, with a little strategic recruiting and some luck, obviously there's always a little bit of luck, we had to battle through some really gnarly stuff the year before. When I took over, and it was our first year, and granted, we went, you know, with our conference championship win and loss, we went 13-13. And we're all over the place. You know, we're trying to build new things. The kids had new expectations. I was, like, as a coach, trying to treat them like adults in many situations, just being, you know, letting them make decisions. And they came from a coach before that was like all about making their decisions for them, making, you know, hey, you have to be here. We're going to be like on you all the time. Big brother's watching all the time. And I wasn't going to do that. That was something I agreed with myself. I said, hey, look, I'm going to just keep rewarding great decision making. Like, hey, you got a good quiz grade, or you're on time. Like, keep rewarding those things. And it was tough because the team didn't really know how to respond to that. They hadn't been given that responsibility of good decision making, because their previous, you know, year, they were all just, you know, they were on top of them all the time. And the biggest transition between my first year and second year was a combination of talent, and then a little bit of both, like trusting them in many situations, but also being on top of them in some situations, and kind of finding a good middle ground. And, you know, academics was huge. That was number one, right? That was something I had to crash down on them, was because it's like, hey, if you're not eligible, you don't play. It's just how it is. And we finished last semester of last year with a 3.4 team GPA. And my first year was like a 2.6. So we're making moves, and the kids are working really hard in the classroom. But that was a big piece. Like, and it's funny, once we started getting better grades, the stress of that kind of melted away. And so the kids could really just focus on volleyball. And this last year, you know, we had some juniors that were all from the first year of the program that really kind of matured into their own and created a nice base, because we had a lot of them that got good grades, busted their butts in practice and in the weight room. And then so it really made it easy for our freshmen, who already, you know, somewhat on board because I had been recruiting them for so long, but easy for them to just jump in and really work hard because that was the example set in that year. And then we have some really talented, European players that, set a really high standard and, not always the easiest guys to play with, but I think a lot of our guys started to respect the fact that like, hey, these guys are going to help us win, but we've got to work together to figure it out. And that's tough because it's like where, Eden comes from or Conrad's from Poland and Pedro's from Brazil, like each guy brings something different and a different time and their expectations is different because they come from a totally different culture. So how they start working together this last year, we really found a rhythm with the whole team of like, hey, these were our roles. We had compatible roles. We had guys that were busting their butts. And even if it was just a guy that came in to be a DS, crushed it as being a DS. And that's really when I feel you see good teams continue to be good, is when their roles are on point. When a guy gets one chance to serve in a match and he comes in and he wants to be the best at that one serve and dig that ball, that's when you see how a culture really is, right? Because it's like that means he feels that special that he gets to be in that moment, that it's like, and everyone else trusts him to do his job. That's when you're going to start winning more games. And that's what we started to get this last season, is no matter what position, no matter where, was making an impact. You got your shot. Even if you're our backup setter, our setters worked in tandem the whole year. They were a setting staff. We had them, they were encouraging each other. Example, I had to take out our starting setter, who's a freshman, and our junior setter got in and helped us win a game to go into the 5th set against Vanguard. And as a coach, that's when you're like, okay, what do we do? Do we keep our junior setter in who just helped finish out the set, or do we put our freshman back in who had battled the whole first, half of the match? I put the freshman back in, and, the junior just goes, hey, man, you got this. Get out there and beat this team, right, as he's walking on. And it's like, that got me so fired up. It's like that's all they wanted was to win that match. It had nothing to do with him wanting to set or him going and slumping down and being all sad. It was like, hey, he helps. If he's helping Lucas get better every day by competing in the gym, then he's done his job. And that's where I think you really start to see, those teams that are consistently in the Final Four and stuff, because their culture just continually turns out that competitive, hey, we're all here to just keep competing with each other. But at the end of the day, if I work my butt off, I only make him better. So if he's out there, he's as good or better than me.
That's great. I mean, you're touching on a lot of the questions we had without us even having to ask them. I mean, it's great to hear your philosophy. It really sounds like you do a great job building up this program. I guess the next question from us then would be, in order for you to stay fired up and balance all this, what do you do in order to kind of keep a good life and work balance? I know you got a lot of volleyball going on, but is there anything you can tell us that helps you keep that big smile on, that we're so used to, or, it's just volleyball what does it for you?
No, I think it does in many ways, because I still play on occasion. I still like to have fun playing volleyball with my friends, but I don't think that's what makes my season like tolerable. I think it's spending time with my family when I can. My parents mean a lot to me. My brother and his family mean a lot to me. My nieces and my sister-in-law. So spending time with them and, just quality time with friends. I still see some, my buddies from Pacific that we're still super close. So we still, we do trips. We'll go down to Big Sur and just, go hiking, and just got to find time. Like if you don't give yourself, because I make a lot of decisions for a lot of people. I'm in charge of a lot of things. Even at Menlo, I'd say I even have more things in terms of being in charge of our different staffs. But just got to find time for yourself and whatever that is. Like there'll be like a Sunday that maybe I do nothing, but that's it. Like it's my choice that I can do whatever I want on a certain day. Whether it's, hey, I do go to Santa Cruz and go to the beach, or maybe I do nothing. but that's my choice and that's my day to just kind of recover. That, and I'll tell you right now, this changed the game for me. It seems kind of silly, but prepping your core for season as a coach, because you get up and down from your seat a lot, you know, and all that stuff, and not having back pain during the whole, like, you're traveling, you're driving, all this stuff, and preparing for that. I did this last season, so much smoother in terms of my ability to be agile on the road and just, you know, be involved with the team rather than being in pain or this, that, and the other. So those were, you know, definitely something I feel that was like a game changer this year. And it's funny, it seems like I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try that this year. And it was like, wow, okay, I'm ready. But, you know, I think that everyone has a different path. Like that, you know, I know coaches that just want to coach more volleyball. That's what centers them. Like right now, I love, like, coaching club sometimes can be a grind just because I would be in season right now or in fall and we're doing tournaments and doing all this stuff. But the fact that that's the only team I get to coach right now is amazing, right? I get to be in the gym with them and we get to work. And my 17s team is amazing. They're fantastic. We've got some really talented players. I'm really blessed to have this squad right now. And I mean, we had a kid that just committed to UCLA, the kid that's committed to UC Santa Barbara. We've got some other players that are already talking to coaches, and, you know, they're 2022s. So they're, you know, they're young, but they're, you know, 6'9", 6'8", you know, touch 11.5, 11.6 already. So being able to go into that and get my coaching fix has been different, because normally it's like you burn out on coaching a little bit sometimes. But this has been more of like, okay, like, get me back in the gym. Or, hey, when we were not able to coach inside, like coaching beach, I hadn't coached beach in a long time. It was so amazing and so fulfilling. So it's really kind of weird opposite time for me right now, because it's more like finding more opportunities to coach rather than, hey, I need to take my time and go and relax or do this. It's like I need to coach, because normally we'd be from October 15th to November 15th. That's when Menlo has their fall season. We'd be practicing, we'd be scrimmaging Stanford and Santa Cruz. We'd be doing these things, but we currently are not. So.
Well, speaking of coaching, I know that you have a club practice tonight that you got to go to pretty soon. But, you know, Coach, on my end, Miles might have some other questions for you. But, you know, I just super, super proud of you. You know, I had the pleasure to be your teammate, and you were a few years older than me. You did some great things at Pacific. It's been extremely fun to watch your coaching career. And in all honesty, if someone were to ask me who's been an influence on you, I mean, you've given me some opportunities to work at some camps. You've given me some opportunities to work at that high performance when we went down to Florida and did really well there. I just really appreciate you, Coach Todd. I've heard some really good things about you in the San Diego community. I know that you're recruiting some kids down here, and they speak very highly of you. So on behalf of the Pacific Tigers, and, you know, I'm just super proud of you, and I'm glad you made it to the show tonight.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This is awesome. I hope you guys, keep it up. The more volleyball content and coaching content is good. It helps you make better decisions, right? It's like it helps you get through those weird, tough times that before all this was out, that you'd have to kind of go through on your own. For some of those coaches that are coaching at those lower levels where they got this head coaching job, this is stuff that can, really help them develop earlier, right? And be a better coach from day one, rather than, granted, making mistakes is a good thing, but it does help, have a path already through some previous person's mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I have to say too, I definitely enjoyed my time with you at Pacific too. Again, the one thing I always remember, you got an infectious smile, and you were always somebody working hard, which I always appreciate. And again, it just sounds like you've really been able to incorporate that in your coaching philosophy and help bring along, hopefully some great young men. We definitely need that right now. And so yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to do this for us tonight. And we definitely hope it kind of takes off, because we do think there's a lot of valuable coaches out there right now that can definitely share their message. So if there's anything else you want to add to tonight, now would be the time to go for it.
I think just for kids right now, it's super important to get out and do something, whether it's volleyball or not. Find an activity, get out. I mean, these are prime hours of youth that need to be out there. I don't know, playing basketball, playing volleyball, playing something to keep them active, keep their brains moving. I mean, it's a tough time, but I think that this is also a time that if you're gritty enough, you're going to come out on top. And, I think that a lot of kids are just kind of getting sucked into social media, inside computers, all this stuff where it's like, we need some thinkers out there that say, hey, this is, I need more, I want more, and be willing to use this kind of crazy scenario we're in to an advantage. I think some kids aren't, and we need to keep pushing kids to, think outside the box.
All right. That's a great message to end on. Again, thank you so much, Todd, for being on tonight.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. And
keep me posted on your next episodes and stuff. I'm looking forward to following your content.
All right. Yeah. Next week we have Sam Crossan actually coming on.
Sam, it's awesome.
Yeah. So hopefully he can give us some good words of advice like he gave you and fire us up a little bit too. Hopefully.
I'm sure he will.
Yeah.
Right.
And so yeah, again, follow us on Valuable Coaching on YouTube, and we look forward to putting out more content. But thank you again so much, Todd.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.
All right.
Night. Bye.